Okay. Hi, I'm Teri Taylor. I'm a business opportunity specialist with the Small Business Administration, and today we're going to discuss HUBZone certification. So, like any program dealing with the federal government, it was created by an act, and it was the 1998 HUBZone Empowerment Act and codified in Title 13 of the Code of Federal Regulations in Section 126. So you're probably thinking, just what is a hub zone? Well, a hub zone is a geographical location located within one or more historically underutilized business zones. These are typically determined by the census. That's the most common way, but there are other areas that can be determined as a hub zone, such as a non-metropolitan county, Indian reservations, redesignated areas. A redesignated area is a non-metropolitan county that no longer qualifies, but when they cease to qualify for the designation, they're allowed to retain it for 3 years, and it's called redesignated. Qualified base closure areas, qualified disaster areas, or government declared areas. And, why would you want to get certified as a hub zone company? Well, there is a contracting benefit when you're working with the federal government. Prime federal contracts can be set aside for HUBZone participation only. That means only HUBZone qualified companies can bid on these contracts. And if you're working with a large prime such as Textron or Procter & Gamble, if they do business with the federal government, they have subcontracting goals and they get credit for working with a HUBZone company, which makes you more desirable as a subcontractor when working with a large prime, or if it's a large prime on a federal contract, they also have subcontracting plans. And if you're a certified HUBZone company and you bid on a federal full and open competition, and the two apparent successful offerers are you and a large business, and the large business naturally can bid lower than you, there's a 10% price adjustment on your company. And if your bid is within 10% higher, within a 10% higher adjustment, then the contract will go to your company. So you have that 10%. You can be up to 10% higher than the large business. Now, that does not come into effect if the apparent successful offer is a small business, and it also is only for full and open competition. It does not apply to small business set-asides. And, I don't know how familiar you are with the SBA's Mentor Protege program, but this makes you attractive to potential large mentors, because if they mentor with you, you can form joint ventures and bid on HUBZone set-aside contracts as a small business. And even if you get the certification, you've achieved the HUBZone certification, that doesn't restrict you to only bidding on HUBZone contracts. You can still bid on small business project contracts, full and open competition. If you're a service disabled veteran-owned firm, you still have that capability. Woman-owned still, you can still, anything you qualify for, you can still continue to bid on those contracts. It doesn't limit you just to HUBZone. And how does this come into play when you're thinking of procurement and the federal purchasing? Well, the federal government has an umbrella goal of setting aside 23% of its purchasing to small business. So you have this 23% procurement goal, and it acts as the umbrella. And within that goal, you have a 3% historically underutilized business zone goal, which is the hub zone. And I can tell you, historically, it is hard for the federal government to achieve the 3% hub zone goal. So the certification requirements, what is required for you to obtain your HUBZone certification? It is, number one, that you be a small business. That small business needs to be 51% owned and controlled by U.S. citizens, community development corporations, agricultural cooperative, Native Hawaiian or Indian tribe companies. The principal office, now this is the key and kind of the kickoff point, is your principal office has to be located within a hub zone. Then in addition to that, 35% of your employees need to reside within a hub zone, because the goal of the program is to increase development in these communities and hire within them, and ultimately bring them out of that hub zone status, because those areas are areas of high unemployment and low income. So we want to promote growth within those areas. So there's, a few definitions we need to review before we, go into any more detail on this. One is, what is a principal office? A principal office is the location where a majority of your employees physically perform their job functions. It's not where they report to work, but it's where they physically work. And, a location, when you're reporting on locations, you have to include your offices, warehouses, and even telework sites. So it's any physical location, and it will have to be accounted for because you'll submit a firm location list, which we'll discuss in a little more detail. And who is an employee? An employee is an individual that works a minimum of 40 hours a month. There are a few shades of gray in this area, but you don't want to focus on those. The main thing is you have an individual that works for the company a minimum of 40 hours a month. Now, a HUBZone employee, that is the definition of an employee. So you have counted the number of employees you have. So who qualifies to be a HUBZone employee? Well, a HUBZone employee has to have resided within that designated hub zone for a minimum of 180 days prior to the date of your application. The certification is all based on the date of your application. And 180 days is approximately 6 months. And then they have what they call a HUBZone legacy employee, which there's really a benefit to a legacy employee, because that's an employee who resided in the hub zone for a minimum of 180 days, 6 months prior to that application date, or what we call your electronic verification date, the date you say, I've got the application in and I'm verifying the information is correct. And they continue to reside within a hub zone for 180 days after the date of application. And they become what is termed a legacy employee. And what's the benefit of that? With sufficient documentation of this employee's continued residency within the hub zone 6 months before and 6 months after the application, they are considered a hub zone employee for the firm as long as you remain qualified for the designation, and as long for as long as you remain qualified for the designation, even if they move out of the hub zone after the qualification. So really, if you're wanting to pursue HUBZone certification, and you should all have received PDFs, so some of this is a little involved, but on here I have the link to the mapping system for the HUBZone program. So really the first step is to determine if your principal office location is located within a HUBZone. If it's not, there's no reason to apply because you're not going to qualify. So you run your address and yay, you see here this address is in a qualified HUBZone. Well, you've met step one. Now you need to go a little further and start doing your research and gathering your documentation. And the first thing is your ownership documentation. You're going to have to submit proof of the owner's citizenship. And again, that's 51% of the owners. Your formation documents, you're going to have to be prepared to submit your formation documents based on your individual legal structure. If you're a franchise, you're going to have to submit the franchise, and if you're an ESOP, you're going to have to submit a copy of the employee stock ownership plan or trust. So what are they looking for when they want you to submit the proof of the citizenship? The program will accept your birth certificate, a valid U.S. passport. It cannot be expired. That is not considered proof if it's expired. A certificate of citizenship or naturalization. And whatever you do, do not submit a Social Security card. They do not want to see your Social Security number. You'll want to submit, if you're an LLC, your certificate of organization or formation, whatever your state calls it, your operating agreement, if you're a corporation, your articles of incorporation and your bylaws, and you want to be very careful to submit any amendments that have happened to those formation documents since the inception of your business. Now, one thing I do want to point out is the principal office location, as we noted, is the location where the most employees physically perform their work. This does not have to be your headquarter location. You can be incorporated in any state, or you can have a headquarters where, all the paperwork and stuff is done and it has 5 employees. But if you have a plant where you've got 100 employees, that plant is your principal office. It may not be where all the legal and accounting and things are done, but that is where the most number of employees physically perform their work. They are not one and the same in terms of definition. So you've went through and you've gathered your ownership documents and you're ready to verify your employees' 35% HUBZone residency. You're going to have to submit proof of their residency identification, a HUBZone map for each employee, your payroll records, and an employee list. So let's go into a little more detail, and what you cannot forget is that 180-day rule where your employee must reside in the HUBZone for 180 days prior to the application date, the date you verify that. So when you have an employee that brings you a driver's license and you calculate the number of days they've been in the HUBZone, if it's 175 days, then you need to make sure you do not verify that application until that driver's license shows that they've resided in the HUBZone 180 days. And with any identification that comes in, it cannot be expired. Some employees do not drive, so they have a state identification card. It cannot be expired either. And they'll also accept a voter registration card, but that's not really that good. They must be dated, but they're not always that accurate, and you may be asked to submit more information on that employee. I looked at my voter registration card, and I've lived at my house for 21 years, and my voter registration card is dated 6/20/2020. So it's really not, especially in an election year, is really not that helpful. Now, there are a lot of states and places where rather than a physical address, a P.O. box is on the driver's license. In the instances where your employee's driver's license notes a P.O. box instead of a physical location, you need to supplement that driver's license in the application with a current lease agreement, mortgage statement, change of address card, or a couple of utility bills. The reason I say a couple of utility bills is you need a utility bill that shows a usage period that is at least 180 days old, and a current utility bill showing that they're still residing at that physical location, because you can move all over the place and retain a P.O. box. And then you submit a HUBZone map for each individual employee, and you want to write or type their name on each map. When you're, getting the documentation together, you want to put their proof of residency and then follow that with a map with their name on it, because you're going to be uploading these documents. And so you want a nice consistent flow. John's map, Mary's map. Otherwise, they'll return it and ask you to do that. The application will be returned to ask you to clean it up a bit. Okay, now I am not going to read this entire slide. This slide is in here for people that, there's always, you come into instances where an employee does not have a state identification card or a driver's license, and there's a statement that SBA will accept, and it's an explanation of why they do not have a driver's license. You note that they are an employee of they need to note that they are an employee of your firm, their name, their home address, and how long they have lived there. So with your PDF of this program, you can just copy this statement and use it, because it is an acceptable sample statement. But just having the employee sign this statement is not sufficient proof that they're residing in a HUBZone. You have to supplement this statement with a copy of a lease, a mortgage statement, again, the 2 utility bills, one that's a usage period 180 days prior to the application date, and one for the time of review to show they're still living there. And then for goodness sakes, if you have grandma is working for you, she does not drive, and she lives in this residence, but there's no utility bills, there's nothing in her name, then you get the same type of statement from the son, who say is the homeowner, and the same mortgage statement, lease, utility. You repeat this process with statements and everything until you can get proof to that kernel of proof. And I've seen that, 2 statements have to be in prior to being able to prove the person's residency with the backup documentation, sometimes 3. But you'll just keep repeating this, because the HUBZone processing office has to have proof. So, we get to payroll. You have to, another way that you're proving your employee is they are most often on your payroll. And SBA will accept a payroll summary or report, but the payroll submission has to contain the employees' names, the number of hours they work for each pay period, the wages they earn for each pay period, and it must state the pay period beginning and ending dates. So as a general rule of thumb, employees show up on the payroll. Independent contractors, 1099 contractors versus W-2, typically the 1099 are not your employee. If you have an accountant that comes in 3 hours a month and does your bookkeeping for you and is independent of your business and has their own business and you pay them on a 1099 basis, that's a contractor. And the payroll submission is for a 4-week period. This payroll is how you're showing that the employee has worked a minimum of 40 hours a month in that period, and it has to encompass the date of the application, the date the application was submitted, and the 3 weeks preceding that. If you're paying on a weekly basis, the week that you submitted the application and the 3 payroll periods prior. If you're bi-weekly, the bi-weekly payroll that has the application date and 1 pay period previous to that. It's a 4-week submission that includes the date of the application and the 3 previous weeks. So, there are some employees of a company that do not show up on the payroll. It's typically your salaried employee or owners that are taking a draw or maybe not even being compensated. This right here, I put this in for you. This is the statement you're going to want to submit for their payroll, and where they give their name, they explain however they get paid, and based upon your individual payroll periods, they note the pay period and the hours they worked during that payroll period, and you just continue on until you have got the week of the application submitted and the 3 weeks previously. So this is a sample for you for your unpaid, salaried, or owners that get a draw. You need to submit a statement like this. And another document you will need to submit is the employee list. The whole purpose of the employee, besides the residency, when we're talking payroll, and you've got the residency, the payroll, we're wanting to verify that they are an employee. So you'll have to submit an employee list. And it's kind of amazing how difficult people will make this employee list. Basically, the list needs the name, the description of them, full-time, part-time, employee, union agreement, whether they reside in a hub zone, and the number of hours the employee works per month. To me, the easiest way to do this is get in Excel, put those 4 little categories in, list your employees, give the description, tell whether they're a resident, and hours per month. The employee list wants the hours per month because we're determining if they meet the minimum of the employee definition. Now you see here, we've got 3 employees, but Jack Webb only works 20 hours a month. So for the purposes of the HUBZone program, Jack's not an employee. This is a 2-employee company. Jack's just not. He's not meeting that minimum requirement. So, which is really good because you've got 2 employees here, one that resides in a hub zone and one that doesn't. So in this company, you've got 50% hub zone residency based on your actual employees. The next consideration, and it seems very simple, is the principal office location. You need to be able to submit proof of occupancy. You'll submit a utility bill and a firm location list. It's very important to note you cannot combine your firm location list with your employee list. They are two separate documents and used for two separate purposes. So for proof of occupancy, lease agreement, rental agreement, deed, they have to be valid. They need to be in effect. The firm's legal name must be identified as the lessor, renter, or owner. If you have a deed and it only lists a legal description, you have to accompany that with a property tax bill or insurance policy supporting the physical address. And of course, that needs to be in the firm's legal name. Now, say you're a home-based business. You do not have to create a lease for yourself. The SBA understands that there are some home-based businesses that may have just a single owner, or somebody reports to your home. If you are a true home-based business, you're not going to have to create a lease, but you are going to have to submit a lease, rental agreement, or deed showing that you are there. Sometimes there are additional questions on home-based businesses, but if it's not your business practice to lease the area you're officing out of in your home, you do not have to jump up and create a lease just for the purposes of the certification. Utility bill. The main thing about the utility bill for the principal office is the usage period must cover the time of review. Once again, it's that date that you electronically verify the application and it's submitted. It cannot be for a cell phone. Acceptable utilities are gas, electric, water, sewer, or landline phone. But a lot of leases include utilities. You want to submit a page where you clearly annotate where that is contained in your lease. And even if your utilities are contained in your lease, you want to think about, am I paying for my Wi-Fi? Am I paying for broadband? And if you are, you want to submit that documentation, something that shows you're paying for something, because unless if you're working in out of a college incubator type thing, it often they supply the Wi-Fi, but it's clearly noted in the lease. So if you have anything that shows you pay beyond these, you want to submit that as well. And if it's not mentioned in the lease and your landlord is just supplying this because maybe he has an office and there's some extra rooms and you're officing out of one of those extra rooms, you're going to have to get a statement where he declares upon penalty of perjury that he's not charging you for the utilities or Wi-Fi or anything, that you just have a base rent. The firm location list. The firm location list serves a different purpose than the employee list. The employee list is a picture in time of how many HUBZone employees you have, who works a certain number of hours a month. The firm location list is a picture in time of your locations. And so it has a few definitions. The office is the location maintained by a firm. You may have one or more. A job site is where people go to work. If you're in construction, it's where they're physically, digging the holes, building the buildings. If you're in a service industry, the job site is where you're going to perform your service. If you have a telework employee, those are considered off-site locations, and you have to account for telework locations too, because the definition of a principal office again, is the location where the greatest number of employees physically perform their work, not where they report, but where they physically and actively perform their work. And the firm location list requires a complete address and description of each location, the names of employees that work at those addresses, the number of hours each week the people work at each hours. And you notice the firm location list doesn't want the monthly hours. The firm location list is focused on weekly hours because it's not trying to determine if the person meets the employee definition. It's just trying to determine where these people are physically working per week. The days of the week and hours each office is staffed. And if you've got contracts for job sites that are not intermittent, you will be including those. But contracts for job sites that are not, you'll include those contract job sites. Say, for example, you have a job to do janitorial service for the airport in Wichita, and it's through an aviation contract, and it's a base year and 5 options. You have employees working there, and so that is what's considered a job site. Will that count against your principal office location? Say you've got 10 people working at that job site full time, but at the office you've got 5. Job sites such as, or you're building a building and it's going to take you a year on that site. You'll list that site. Job sites don't count against your principal office as a rule because those are not your locations. Telework locations do because those are your employees, but job sites that are not intermittent, do not. If you're in an industry where you're providing a service where you go out and you give somebody a massage and you can do 50 people in a week, do you have to account for all those intermittent jobs? No. These are long-term contracts where these are contracts where you go. Now, if you're a construction industry and you could have 5 different job sites in 1 week, you just list job site, because that's intermittent. If you're service and you have these intermittent massages you're going out and doing, you'll just do a category that says job site. We don't expect you to have to submit every location unless it's a long-term project. And then you want to note that, but you want to clearly denote that that's not an office you own, but a job site. And it gets a little confusing on that. So I'm going to show you a sample of a firm location list because this is another area that people really, really have a hard time with. So we've got several employees. We have an office location right here, ABC Janitorial Service, and there's the address and the hours they're working. Bam, we've got most of the information right in this little box. Then we've got the name of employees and the hours they work. So Jane works at the office location. Well, in addition to that, ABC Janitorial Service and Construction has a warehouse. Bob is their warehouse employee, and that's where he works. Then they are doing a cleaning job at the Corps of Engineers that's got a base and 4 option years, so they list that location. And Tammy Hunt here is part-time, and that's her sole job. Is she goes in for 3 hours a day from 6 to 9, and so she works 15 hours a week. Then, we've got our various construction sites. Bill is the construction guy. He's out there. And Marcia Goodley is our only teleworker because she lives in Las Vegas and we're obviously in Kansas. So this is what a sample firm location list looks like. But do you see something wrong with this picture? Anything wrong with this picture? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't talk. Think about the definition of principal office. A principal office is the location where the majority of employees physically perform their work. So here we go. We've got all 5 employees, 5 different locations, and it's one employee working at each location. So this company, ABC Janitorial Service and Construction, does not have a principal office as defined by the HUBZone program. So based on this information, it would not qualify for certification. Now, if Jane and Bob both worked at the office location here, and they had another employee, if they had 2 employees working out of their office that they're wanting to be their primary location, it would qualify. But it has to have a majority of the employees. There's another benefit in the HUBZone program in terms of principal office, and it's called the long-term investment benefit. Small businesses that purchase a building or enter a long-term lease of 10 years or more may keep their HUBZone status for a total of 10 years, even if at some point the office location no longer qualifies as a HUBZone. Now, if you're currently certified, you would need to address this when you voluntarily recertify. And you recertify your status on an annual basis. The only caveat is you do not want to look, you find that your principal office is in a redesignated area. You do not, or if you're looking for a location to open an office and wanting to be HUBZone certified, do not target a redesignated area, because a redesignated area is just an area that's in that 3-year grace period for HUBZone certification. So if you jump and buy an office and buy a building in a redesignated area, this long-term investment benefit doesn't qualify, because the area no longer qualifies as a HUBZone because it's redesignated. It used to qualify, and it's just in that 3-year grace period, so it came out of the HUBZone. The goal was achieved. Employment increased. Poverty decreased. So, if you're looking for a place and want to use this long-term investment, just avoid the redesignated areas like the plague. So, here you are, you've gathered all this, and let's pretend that the firm location list did have a principal office location, and you're ready to apply. You just go to SBA's website and to the HUBZone program, and these 6 steps are listed there, and these are active links on that page you can go to. But first, you got to make sure you've got your SAM account, and anybody that's doing business with the federal government will have had that. And most people that are subcontracting to large primes, the large primes have already asked them to create SAM accounts so that they can verify their size and things such as that. You apply for the program through what we call a general login system, and that's GLS. You'll want to create yourself an account, and then you fill out the application within that system. You have to log in and select Access and HUBZone to get to the application. And one thing about the HUBZone program is all correspondence is done through email. So you've electronically verified, you've got your application in. They'll send you an email so that you can electronically verify your application. And that is the date that your payroll needs to cover. So you really need to be strategic about timing. If you do payroll on a monthly basis, on the 15th of the month, you don't want to submit a HUBZone application. You want to make sure you time it so that you'll be able to submit the appropriate documentation. And then you'll upload that documentation into what SBA calls the SBA envelope. So within 10 days after you verify your application, you'll be uploading the documentations to what SBA calls an SBA envelope. And then you'll get certified in the need to update the SAM profile. SBA will okay it, and you'll go into SAM and you'll click that you're HUBZone. Prior to that, without SBA doing the steps, you cannot show yourself as a HUBZone. So I'm filling out a SAM profile for the first time in my life. I don't really know what a HUBZone is, but I see historically underutilized business zone, and I know, I run to the map and I see that I'm located in one. Well, the SAM program will not allow me to click the box stating I'm HUBZone. SBA is the one that works with SAM and creates that opportunity so that you can update the profile to show that you are HUBZone certified. It has to work that way, because there are a lot of people that when they find out they're in a HUBZone, they think they're certified. And I know for a fact that the state of Texas has their own hub, what they call a hub certification, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the SBA's HUBZone program. But some companies in Texas that get that certification legitimately think they're HUBZone certified, and they are for their state, but they're not certified for the federal program. So I'm going to give you a few hints on applications. Say this is GLS. This is what you're going to see when you see GLS. And you've got you've made it, you've created your account. Over here on the left is a user guide. You guys are small businesses going for the HUBZone application. I guarantee you it will save you a lot of frustration if you just follow that link and read the instructions. It's not hard, but there are some leaps in imagination, because you'll create a profile and you think you're done, but before you can get access, you have to update that profile and associate it with the DUNS number for the office that you're attempting to certify. So, that's kind of a leap in the imagination. So I truly, truly recommend you use that guide to get you through that. Then on the SBA's webpage, towards the bottom, they have the supporting document checklist. I am telling you, you will relieve yourself a lot of stress if you get you have to sign sign these, but you will really relieve yourself of some stress if you get the document request based on your legal structure and read it, because it goes into in-depth detail about what is accepted and what isn't. Just don't follow the little checklist you sign and think you're done. Go into it, look at it, especially on proper payroll submission, firm location list. Familiarize yourself with this document, because when you put in an application for the HUBZone program, you submit that application. You upload the documents. It goes through a screening process. The screener will contact you and give you via email and give you, I believe, 10 days to make some clarifications. Say you put everybody's driver's license on one piece of paper and threw a bunch of HUBZone maps in there with no names on it. The reviewer is going to contact you and say, hey, clean up your residency app, get those driver's license and those HUBZone maps in order. And you only submit that documentation. I really should have said this earlier. That documentation is only necessary for the employees that you are counting as HUBZone residents. You do not have to submit that documentation for every employee of your company, only the HUBZone residents. So the screener contacts you, they ask for this, they ask you to clean this up. Then it goes to the analyst. The analyst is actually analyzing the application, and they see where you need to make a correction. And so they'll contact you and they'll give you a few days to make your correction. And this is all going through email. So you submit something, the analyst reviews it, you've gotten it wrong, they'll give you one more chance. You submit something, you're declined. So, you've got to get it right. It's HUBZone applications have to be processed within 60 days. And the analyst, it is a very rigid thing. You can reapply again. There are companies that are legitimately qualified to be HUBZone that have had to apply more than once because they did not pay sufficient attention to proper application submission and did not really pay attention to what the analyst was requesting. That's why, there's a lot of detail on this PowerPoint because you all should have received a PDF, and I want you to be able to refer back to it for the sample statements. But these document checklists they are better than sliced bread. If you have any questions, you can contact me. The best way is through email at this time. You can call me. The HUBZone help desk, there's an email for the help desk, and there may be times when I tell you, oh, for that, you're going to have to contact the HUBZone help desk. And one thing the HUBZone office has that no other program has that is really good is they have what they call office hours on Thursdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, which would be 1 to 2 p.m. our time. And you call in and use this access code, and you actually get to ask questions from an analyst that processes application. The call is for 1 hour, but I don't know how many times I've seen these analysts exceed that hour because they really, it's in their best interest for good applications to be submitted. They don't want to have to see your application 2 or 3 times, especially if you're qualified. They don't want that. They want a good application, and they want to process it, and they want to move on because it's more expedient for everybody just to have it a one-time thing rather than a repeat process over and over. And, they don't necessarily deny you. They'll close the application and tell you your application has been closed because it's been incomplete. Because if you get denied, there's a delay on when you can apply again. So does anybody have any questions?
I'm
still on, aren't I?
So far.
How are we doing on timing?
We got about 10 minutes.
Well, if nobody has any questions,
oh, there is one question.
Let me see. Good.
Somebody asked, does the work from home due to COVID count as telework?
No, they have a special, and it goes into detail on this on SBA's webpage, with the COVID, with people going home, if they normally worked in the office and when the restrictions are over, will be returning to the office and are continuously employed, they're doing some exceptions about that. I recommend just jump on the www.sba.gov, and they have some COVID flexibilities they've got listed on there. But basically they've had to be a little more flexible because, there are areas where people, they're working from home, and if they worked in the office before the pandemic and are expected to return to the office, and you have not, you've kept them on continuous employment, they have some flexibility. They had to do that with this, unchartable thing we've got going on.
Okay, someone else wants to know, do we count the officers in our overall employee count?
Yes, whether they be salaried or doing a draw or anything, anybody that has, and I'm assuming by officers, they're talking about people that have an ownership interest. Yes, you do count them.
Can the employee live in a different hub zone from the company's hub zone?
Yes, they can. And even in the 180 days, believe it or not, this can get real complicated in some areas of the country because you have a hub zone area. They can even be in a hub zone in a different state, your employee. And you have some areas that are hub zone where you have employees that move a lot. So you have to just, but they're all, but that, say that entire county is a hub zone, and you've got Jack that he lives here, he does a month-to-month lease here, he lives here a couple months, then he moves somewhere else and has a couple month-to-month lease. It's just doing the paperwork well to show that they were continuous. The main thing is that the employee reside in a hub zone, doesn't have to be in the same as the principal office, doesn't have to be the same in the state, and they don't have to stay at the same address in the hub zone. They can move from one hub zone residency address to another hub zone residency address. It's the continuous residency within the hub zone.
Someone said, I want to open a bakery and coffee shop. What benefits to me for being in a hub zone?
I don't think any, because the type of business you're opening is really not something that the federal government is directly contracting to you with. It may help you with a large prime if somebody like Textron or something wanted to use a caterer, but this program is basically attempting to create economic growth in areas using federal procurement dollars that are set aside either as a contract or by having large primes have subcontracting goals, of which HUBZone is within. A bakery and a coffee shop, there are very few direct contracting offers. I would be doing you a disservice to tell you that you're going to get income from the HUBZone certification in that type of business, because most likely you wouldn't. And I apologize for that.
Someone asked, if approved, how long are we certified?
You recertify every year. They have, it's an annual recert, as long as you qualify is the basic answer, but you'll go through a recertification process every year. Some years it's a simple signing off that you still qualify for HUBZone certification, and others it's a more in-depth recertification where they're going to request you to reproduce all the documentation. So that brings in the question, what happens when my HUBZone percentage falls below 35%? Well, we know that happens. That's when you go through steps in the rehiring. You've lost a HUBZone employee and you've got to rehire another one to get up to the 35%. We need to see that you are attempting to maintain by targeting HUBZone areas to rehire this employee. And that would be something that after you're certified, you'll want to look into on a deeper level. And you can HUBZone. You are not breaking any discrimination laws to attempt to hire employees in a HUBZone because it has nothing to do with a protected class. It's a geographical base. And, job fairs and things like that, but you make an attempt to maintain. Now, if you have an active HUBZone contract and your percentage goes below 20%, then you automatically no longer qualify for HUBZone certification. And if you are supposed to, you have to finish the contract. You're already under a contractual obligation, but you need to self-report to the HUBZone office that you no longer qualify. That's expected because when you recertify at your recertification, it would come out then, and then you're getting into, you can't lie in your recertification process because then you're getting into fraud with the government. So you're expected to self-report that, but that does not mean that you cannot finish that contract because you as a company are contractually obligated to finish the contract. And you'll just have to get your percentages back up and reapply.
So this question may have, you may have answered it in what you just said, but someone was wondering if there are audits that are performed to make sure that you're still qualified once you are certified as a HUBZone.
There's a recertification process, and that is basically your audit, the extent of, and some years you just recertify that you are in compliance. You basically, state we still meet the certification requirements using the process through the recertification system. And when you're doing that, you're making a statement under penalty of perjury, and fraud, that you still qualify. But other years, you will have to reproduce all of the documentation again to prove that you still qualify. And if you've went below the percentage, you need to be able to show that you have attempted to maintain. You've taken the steps to attempt to maintain by targeting hiring employees from a HUBZone.
So it looks like we have time for one more question, and someone wants to know, how often do the HUBZones shift?
Okay, that's a moving target. We have a census coming out. Right now, the maps are frozen until the results of the census come out. But when that census comes out, the census declared HUBZones are in for 10 years. But then we have these non-metropolitan counties, and that's based on unemployment and poverty levels that are averaged over 5 years by the Department of Labor and Department of Commerce. So those, they have some flexibility. They take those areas and they're doing those figures and averaging, so you can have somebody jump in there right away. But when those areas no longer qualify, they get that 3-year grace period. So I jump in, they've averaged 5 years, and my little county is HUBZone. And then, the next time this is done, which is done like once or twice a year, I'm sorry, I forget, and I'm no longer HUBZone, then okay, it's no longer going to qualify, and it's going to become redesignated, and it will be 3 years. If you are an Indian reservation, you're always HUBZone. If you're a Brock location, that varies. It's like 5-7 years. I really apologize for that, but we're getting a little obscure when we get to BRAC locations. I know where to find that information if that's what somebody's designated as a BRAC. And so it's 10 years to at least a minimum of 3 in redesignated, which would so you'd probably have a minimum of a year, possibly, so 4. But, Indian reservations perpetually. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that answered the question.
Yeah, it gets kind of complicated in those things. Go ahead.
So we do have one last question. What technically qualifies areas as hub zones? Is it population versus income? How do they qualify counties to be hub zones?
I'm going to have to go back to my first slide, because I've got that on there, and it's poverty and unemployment. And I can't remember if the unemployment is 140% less than the nation's average, or and the poverty 80% less than the nation's average. It's on there. Let me just 1 second here. I'm sorry, because I've got it on one of the first slides, because somebody always asks that. Okay, for a non-metropolitan county, the median income is less than 80% than the state median, and unemployment is not less than 140% of the average unemployment rate for the U.S. or the state in which the county is located, based on a 5-year average. So the income is 80% less than the state poverty level, and the unemployment is at least 140% of the average. Which, when you say that to me, I just kind of go blank. I'm sorry, it just kind of blinks me out. Crosses my eyes.
So that was our last question. I'm not seeing any more. So thank you so much for taking time today to talk to us about this.
Well, I enjoyed it, and I think everybody that was on the call, like I said, if you have questions, you can contact me, the help desk, and I really encourage people that are interested in, getting certified for the HUBZone program to listen in on those office hours. I've had conversations with companies that got on there every week for maybe a couple months before they submitted their application, because you never know what question a small business is going to ask, and it can relate to you, and they're really interesting. And if we have any SBA employees on the line and they want to know more about the HUBZone program, that is also a really good source. So thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed this. Have a good day.